We don't know how many are out there. There are many planes, perhaps. We need to evacuate the UN. He said, but the UN, would they attack the UN? I said, yes. And obviously we know now they have attacked the UN all over the world, and
yes,
particularly
in Iraq and
in Algeria, where
yeah,
and other places where they've attacked UN buildings. So in fact, we did evacuate. And I told the Secretary General was not in the building at the time. I advised that he stay there. And we evacuated the building, and then I went down into the basement of the United Nations and monitored the events from there until we brought the UN staff back, which I think they didn't come in the next day, but the day after they came back into the building. But I was advocating that they get back in. Let's get back to work. We're now safe. We now have an assessment of the situation. Let's get back to work and get back to what the United Nations is serving the people around the world, not allow Al-Qaeda to intimidate us.
When you, I mean, in retrospect, and I know that it's always easy to look back and judge things, but in retrospect, at the time, what did you make of the way the administration reacted to such a catastrophic event?
Even on the fourth day, when we had closed the civil aviation, I thought it was too much. There were no planes flying in the United States. It was very strange to be here in New York City and look up in the sky, and it was beautiful sunny days on September 11th and afterward, and there were no planes. On any day in New York City, you can look at the sky and you can see many planes going back and forth. But for 4 days after 9/11, there were no planes, and I was making phone calls saying, let's get going again here. This is Al-Qaeda. Yes, this is a dangerous, serious organization, but they're on the run right now. So let's get going here. Let's not allow them, as I said, let's not fall to their trap of terrorizing ourselves. Let's get moving. And eventually we got it going. And then I thought President Bush did the right thing. And he went after the Taliban in Afghanistan. And he launched an operation with very minimal U.S. forces, about 400 people, CIA and Special Forces guys, of course with the U.S. Air Force, enormous power.
Sure.
In conjunction with the Northern Alliance fighters, began to move south against the Taliban, and against everyone's prediction, the Taliban started to collapse city after city. First Mazar al-Sharif, then Jalalabad, then Kabul, all the way down to Kandahar, and within 2 months they were defeated. It was a shocking defeat by the Taliban. And from there I thought, this is great, and we did that with a very small amount of forces. We went to Bonn with the UN, put a government in charge. It was Karzai, who looked pretty good at the time. Now he doesn't look so good, but he was the choice, and I thought things were going well. And we started to wind down our military presence there. But then I think we got distracted by going after Iraq. We kind of got distracted, and I think that's unfortunate.
Sure.
But but it is what it is, and I made myself pretty clear along that whole way publicly.
Now we have a lot of literature on the so-called missed opportunities before 9/11. Some people who were actually either with CIA or the FBI or in the administration, they talk about specific things. Now you were in the mill, and you know exactly what was happening, and you can assess. Would there have been any way whatsoever that somebody somewhere could have done anything to at least make this a little bit more bearable?
I mean, to be able to capture him before 9/11?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think there were opportunities that were missed. But again, unfortunately, we weren't focused enough on it. And so I remember very clearly in 1999 and 2000 when we were tracking bin Laden in Afghanistan, but we just didn't have the focus in order to go after him. I remember very specifically at one time trying to move a naval warship into the Indian Ocean so that we could shoot a missile when we spotted bin Laden in Afghanistan. Let's attack this guy. He just, blew up our embassies. And then later, after he blew up the coal, we lost track of him. But before that, we had reports of where he was, and we were just focused on other issues around the world, and we just missed opportunities. Sometimes we did not have the armed predator then.
Yeah.
We had predators.
Yeah.
these drones that fly
There was
around.
a great controversy about whether to arm the drone or not to arm the drone.
That's right, and I was in the middle of that battle, and Richard Clark, at the time who was the head of counterterrorism at the White House, was advocating to arm the Predator, and there were tests of it being conducted out in New Mexico at the time, in 1999, 2000, but it wasn't part of the U.S. military's inventory or the CIA. And neither the CIA nor the Air Force, who run these two, both of them have drones, were moving very quickly on this. And we were pushing them, Clark and I, get the armed Predators. If we had an armed Predator prior to 9/11, we probably would have been able to knock out bin Laden sometime in 1999 or 2000. It might have been a very different world, but we didn't have it. And we missed those opportunities.
I once asked Michael Scheuer, who was a CIA analyst. I don't know what you think of him, but I once asked him what usually happens when Al Jazeera broadcasts one of bin Laden's tapes, and he told me that usually what happens is that the office is split into two sections, the majority and the minority. The majority would be looking from a security point of view at the background, trying to figure out where his about is and the way he's dressed, how long his beard is, and the rest of it. Whereas the other, of which he was part of, would be just listening to him. Which approach do you think? And I know that you know what I mean, because Michael Scheuer believed that you didn't really need to do much. Just listen to him. You would have really understood a lot.
Unfortunately, we didn't listen to him. We didn't understand what he was and what he was about. You have to do both. Obviously, you have some people that are tactical people trying to find a clue where he is so that we can go out and find him. But the real thing is to listen to what he's saying and try to anticipate what he's going to do, because he really said what he was going to do and did it. And he still continues to send out his messages, although now mostly on audio tape. I haven't seen him on video in quite a while. I don't know why. I have some thoughts about that, but
what are these thoughts? Why don't you share them with us?
I think that he's a very vain man, and prior to 9/11 he was very active with the press, and he loves the camera, and he has all this footage of bin Laden walking in the mountains or there with his troops or making his statements and speeches. But recently he's been shied away from the camera. I think perhaps he's either changed his appearance or doesn't look too good. We saw his last time we saw him, he was looking gray and a little bit gaunt, and perhaps his narcissism is getting to him, and perhaps he's changed his appearance to stay undetected, or perhaps he looks kind of old and haggard and doesn't want to be on videotape, or perhaps he feels that if I do a video production, I may be caught. So for whatever reason, I think it's one of those things, vanity or security, that he's not done on tape, because he certainly loves the camera.
Right. استراحة قصيرة ثم نعود إليكم مع مايكل شيهان الذي كان على رأس مكافحة الإرهاب في وزارة الخارجية الأمريكية في تلك الفترة الحاسمة التي سبقت أحداث 11 من سبتمبر. ابقوا معنا. أهلا بكم مرة أخرى إلى هذا اللقاء الخاص مع السيد مايكل شيهان. So, at the time when he was making all these tapes, I know that it's again easier now to look at things in the past and judge or make a judgment about something or another. Tell us from your point of view, because people there they wouldn't really. I would like them to look at stuff like that from the point of view of someone like yourself, there in the middle of it. What are we thinking about? Yeah, you're thinking about what would you be looking for How do you usually react after this, looking at Al Jazeera or whatever other channel would be?
Well, what I do is I look to find out who the audience is for his message, and what is he trying to say. And he has different audiences.
Right.
He'll often have an audience to, say, the West and the Europeans. In some of his later audio tapes, he'd be talking about specific things that he would want us to do, and he would not attack us. Get out of the Muslim land. Stop attacking our brothers. Stop your alliance with Israel, your alliance with the Saudi government or other governments, and have specific things for grievances, political grievances, that he said, if you were to do this, then we won't threaten you. And so that's a political message where he's trying to drive a wedge in between in the Western governments that are going after him. And his other messages are to his followers, where he's trying to show strength and vision and leadership, and he's trying to rally their morale to keep them focused and motivated to continue to fight for him. So we listen very carefully what political message he's trying to send to the West to try to undermine our resolve, and we're looking for the messages he's sending to his operatives to get them moving and get them to be more proactive. And so I watched it very carefully and tried to analyze exactly what he was trying to do and what it meant for the organization and how we would have to react to that. And so I analyzed it from all those different levels, from who he was trying to talk to, and also by listening to him, try to think about what was on his mind, what tips I might have for where he was, what he was going to try to do.
But some experts argue that bin Laden never really had a quarrel with the United States. It was only when he realized that he can't get through to what he calls corrupt Arab regimes, especially the Saudi royal family. When he realized that he can't get through them, he decided to go for what he called the head of the snake.
Yeah, I think that's the conventional wisdom. But if you go back and look at bin Laden's writings and his discussions, you see his animosity to the U.S. as far back as even the late 80s and early 90s, when he was primarily focused on the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan and with the Mujahideen. But you also see, even back then, an anti-Americanism, and clearly an anti-Israeli sentiment, clearly. But his focus back then was on the Mujahideen and the Soviet Union. When he went to Sudan in the period between 1992 and 1995, you see an evolution of his thinking. He begins to start to focus more on the United States. The U.S. was in Somalia. That bothered him. He tried to support fighters in Somalia. Obviously, the first Iraq war upset him dramatically. He tried to work with the Saudi government for a plan. He was rejected. He lost his citizenship. He became estranged from his family and the Saudi government. You see this evolution of thinking. But really, the real change in bin Laden's thinking was really between 1995 and 1996. And you see the 96, what he calls a fatwa. Obviously, it's not a fatwa, but his own version of a fatwa, his political statement, began to focus on the United States much more in a clear, articulated way. In 96, you see him threatening the United States and talking about our relationship with Israel and our other Arab allies. And focusing on the U.S. and really warning us then, in very explicit terms in 1996, you are the target, the United States, and we're going to attack you, and it's my duty, my Islamic duty to do so. He twists his religious beliefs to fit his agenda to attack the United States. And of course, 2 years later, he was successful in blowing up our embassies. Right. There's the change from bin Laden, right. But really you see it as far back as 1990, 1992 in his conversations in Afghanistan, a very clear anti-Americanism. Yeah. He just didn't focus it operationally until 96.